Officer Daniels and Officer Rivera never expected a routine highway patrol to uncover a nightmare inside a parked truck. They found dozens of bodies carefully hidden, revealing a criminal operation more shocking than anyone could imagine. It began on a quiet, foggy night, the kind where shadows seemed to stretch longer than usual and every sound echoes strangely. Officer Daniels was driving his patrol car along a stretch of highway that rarely saw traffic after dark. The radio was silent, the hum of the tires against the asphalt the only constant. As he rounded a bend, his headlights caught something unusual. A large delivery truck parked at the edge of the road, slightly tilted, as if abandoned in a hurry. Its brake lights flickered weakly, and no driver could be seen inside. Something about the truck felt off, a subtle tension that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Daniels called for backup, and soon, Officer Rivera arrived. Together, they approached cautiously, flashlights cutting through the thick fog that swirled around the truck. The closer they got, the more intense the smell became, a sickly, metallic odor that made both of them uneasy. The engine was still warm, but the cab was empty. There was no sign of movement, no sound other than the occasional rustle of the wind against the truck's metal frame. It seemed impossible that such a large vehicle could be abandoned without reason, especially on a highway where even minor accidents drew immediate attention. Daniels circled the truck, checking the sides and rear, looking for clues. The cargo doors were tightly sealed, bolted shut in a way that suggested deliberate preparation. On the outside, nothing indicated what lay within, nothing to hint at the horror that waited behind those heavy panels. Even the license plate seemed odd, partially obscured and difficult to read, raising questions about the truck's origin and purpose. As the officers debated what to do next, a chill ran down their spines. There was a tension in the air, an invisible weight pressing down, as if the night itself was holding its breath. Daniels finally radioed for the specialized unit to arrive, warning them that something inside the truck might be extremely dangerous. Each second that passed increased the sense of dread. What could possibly be in a truck that was parked so oddly, emanating a strange smell, with no driver in sight? Neither officer could have anticipated the truth. They had seen abandoned vehicles before, even broken-down trucks. But this was different. There was a method to the chaos, a silent warning that something terrible had taken place. The fog thickened, the headlights glinted off the metal doors, and in that tense moment, the officers knew instinctively that opening this truck could change their lives forever. As the cargo doors creaked open, a wave of darkness and an overpowering stench hit the officers instantly. The sight that greeted them was almost impossible to comprehend. Inside the truck, dozens of bodies were stacked tightly, each wrapped in plastic and tied with rough rope. The arrangement was methodical, almost mechanical, as if the person responsible had taken painstaking care to keep everything in order. Officer Daniels felt a surge of nausea, but he forced himself to focus. Every detail mattered. Every label, every piece of clothing, every subtle mark could be a clue to the identity of the victims and the person behind this nightmare. The victims were of different ages, genders, and ethnicities, suggesting this wasn't a random crime. Some appeared to be in their 20s, others older, with children among them, their small forms wrapped tightly in layers of plastic. It was clear that this had been planned, that someone had the resources and cold calculation to commit something unthinkable. The police called for forensic teams, who arrived quickly, wearing protective suits and carefully photographing everything. Fingerprints, clothing, tags, and even the way the bodies were stacked could help investigators piece together the horrifying puzzle. As the officers continued examining the truck, questions began to multiply. Where had the truck come from? Who had loaded it? And why were these people chosen? Every detail seemed to point to a larger operation, something that went beyond a single act of violence. It became clear that this was not the work of a lone criminal. The meticulous organization, the methodical wrapping of each victim, and the calculated route the truck had taken all hinted at a network operating in the shadows, far removed from the public eye. The city would later be shaken by the news. Residents could not believe that something so dark had been happening right under their noses. The media descended on the scene, but the officers were careful to protect the investigation. They knew that revealing too much too soon could alert the criminals, allowing them to disappear before justice could catch up. Even as the truck was finally towed to a secure location, the weight of what had been discovered lingered. For Daniels and Rivera, the faces of the victims would remain etched in their minds. Each body was a story, a life cut short, and a chilling reminder that evil often operates silently, hiding in plain sight until the moment it is uncovered. The city had stumbled onto a nightmare, and the investigation was only beginning. The investigation into the truck and its horrific contents quickly became one of the largest cases the city had ever faced. Detectives worked tirelessly, piecing together every detail of the truck's journey. The license plates led to a shell company that existed only on paper, with no real employees or physical offices. Surveillance footage from highways and nearby businesses revealed the truck moving under the cover of darkness, often stopping at remote areas where no one would notice it. Each stop raised more questions than answers, suggesting a carefully planned network operating in secret. Detectives discovered that the truck had crossed multiple state lines, following a route that seemed designed to avoid major checkpoints. It had visited abandoned warehouses, quiet industrial areas, and secluded loading docks. In each location, they found evidence of activity, discarded packaging, surveillance cameras that had been tampered with, and traces of human presence that pointed to someone carefully monitoring the operation. The officers realized that the criminals behind this were meticulous, organized, and aware of law enforcement methods, making them difficult to track. Forensic teams analyzed fingerprints, DNA, and fibers found inside the truck. Every small clue painted a picture of a larger operation, someone who had the resources to move bodies across long distances without detection. The victims appeared to have been targeted intentionally, each one selected for reasons that remained unclear. Detectives began constructing timelines, trying to determine when each person had been taken and from where. They also examined cell phone records, GPS trackers, and financial transactions, hoping to uncover connections that would lead to the perpetrators. As the investigation progressed, a chilling pattern emerged. The warehouses and storage facilities linked to the truck were not just random locations, they seemed to serve as temporary holding areas, carefully spaced to allow the operation to continue over days or even weeks. Surveillance footage showed shadowy figures wearing masks and gloves, moving swiftly and deliberately, loading and unloading heavy packages that nobody would suspect contained human bodies. The level of precision was disturbing, suggesting the involvement of multiple individuals working in coordination. The deeper the detectives dug, the more they realized that the truck was only one part of a much larger network. This was not a crime of opportunity, but a calculated enterprise, operating in the shadows, exploiting the most vulnerable. Each clue led to another layer of mystery, and the team understood that uncovering the full extent of the operation would require patience, strategy, and careful planning. The sense of urgency grew. Every lead had to be followed, every detail documented, before the criminals had a chance to vanish again. Just when the investigation seemed to be making progress, a shocking new lead came in from an anonymous tip. The message claimed that someone inside law enforcement itself was involved, someone who had access to confidential information about the case. Detectives were stunned. The thought that the mastermind could be watching their every move, guiding the operation from within, made them rethink everything they had uncovered so far. Suspicion and tension spread quickly through the department as officers questioned their colleagues, wondering who could be trusted. Digging into financial records, investigators discovered unusual transactions tied to one of the senior officers. Large sums of money had been deposited and withdrawn from multiple accounts, often from mysterious sources that had no clear origin. Cross-referencing these transactions with truck movements and warehouse activity revealed patterns too precise to be coincidence. It became increasingly clear that the criminal had been using their position to cover tracks, manipulate reports, and ensure the operation remained hidden. The idea that the person orchestrating such a horrific crime was someone sworn to uphold the law sent shockwaves through the team. Detectives decided to proceed cautiously. They monitored the officers' movements, gathering evidence without raising suspicion. Surveillance captured meetings at odd hours, trips to remote locations, and secretive handoffs of packages that mirrored the timing and routes of the truck. Each discovery added layers to the mystery, revealing a level of planning and control that was chilling. The officer's ability to manipulate the investigation had allowed the network to operate with near impunity for months, possibly longer. Meanwhile, forensic analysts continued to work tirelessly on the evidence from the truck and linked warehouses. DNA, fingerprints, and other trace materials began to point directly to the officer, tying them to multiple locations along the route. The sheer scale of the operation became apparent. This was not a single criminal act, but a coordinated enterprise that had exploited trust, authority, and the shadows of the night. The revelation that the mastermind had been hiding in plain sight changed the course of the investigation. Detectives knew they were dealing with someone who could anticipate their moves, manipulate the system, and vanish if given the chance. Every lead had to be followed meticulously, every step calculated, and every action monitored. The stakes had never been higher. The once straightforward case of a truck full of bodies had transformed into a dangerous high-stakes pursuit of a criminal hiding behind the badge, a revelation that left the city in fear and the detectives on edge, knowing that capturing this person would require every ounce of skill, patience, and courage they could muster. The investigation reached its climax weeks later, after careful planning and surveillance. Detectives knew that any misstep could allow the mastermind to disappear forever. Every lead had been double-checked, every clue cross-referenced. The officer suspected of orchestrating the operation was finally tracked to a secluded property on the outskirts of the state, hidden behind tall fences and overgrown vegetation. The location had been used to store equipment and possibly more evidence of the criminal network, making it a critical point in the case. Authorities moved with precision, coordinating teams to secure the perimeter while ensuring the officer could not escape. When they entered the property, they found evidence that confirmed every suspicion: documents detailing shipments, maps of routes, and records linking the victims to specific dates and locations. The officer had meticulously planned each step, but the overwhelming weight of accumulated evidence left no room for doubt. It was the culmination of weeks of tireless work, combining surveillance, forensics, and careful strategy, and it finally brought the nightmare into the open. As the officer was taken into custody, the city began to grasp the scale of what had been uncovered. The truck full of bodies had been just one piece of a far-reaching network, one that exploited trust and hid behind appearances. Investigators were left to identify the victims and track down any remaining accomplices, knowing that even though the main perpetrator was captured, the operation might have extended far beyond what they had discovered. Families of the victims waited anxiously for answers, desperate to understand how their loved ones had disappeared and why. Despite the arrests, many questions remained unanswered. Some victims were never identified, and investigators suspected that more members of the network were still at large. The case highlighted the chilling reality that evil could operate quietly, hiding behind ordinary faces and everyday routines. It served as a stark reminder that even those entrusted with protecting the public could betray that trust in unimaginable ways. In the aftermath, the city struggled to come to terms with the horror it had uncovered. The truck full of dead bodies became a symbol of the fragility of safety and the importance of vigilance. For the officers and detectives involved, the case left lasting scars, memories of the victims, the shocking betrayal from within, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Yet, it also reinforced their commitment to uncovering the truth, no matter how dark it might be. The nightmare had ended, but the lessons it left behind would remain forever etched in the minds of everyone involved, a chilling testament to the hidden dangers that can lurk in plain sight.